Okay, proceed with Department of Finance. Do you want to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christian Osman with the Department of Finance. After months of discussions, data review, and interviews with higher education experts, faculty and staff at UC campuses, and undergraduate and graduate students, the governor and the UC president have agreed that UC will undertake a number of reforms to manage its operations more effectively, and that the president will strongly recommend that the academic senate undertake additional reforms. I'll briefly describe the components of this agreement. First, I'll describe the funds available to the university for operations and facilities. To assist the university with existing obligations, provide full funding for all currently enrolled students, allow for discretionary spending, and reduce energy use, the administration would provide the following in the budget year: $119.5 million in increased general fund on an ongoing basis as proposed in January, $25 million in one-time general fund for deferred maintenance as proposed in January, and $25 million in one-time cap and trade revenues. The administration's multi-year plan will continue to provide 4% increases in direct general fund support in future years. With these state resources, the university has committed to freezing tuition for California residents for 2015-16 and 2016-17. The agreement makes significant reforms in a number of areas that have been long-standing concerns for the governor and the legislature. The first is related to transfer from the California community colleges. Over the next 2 years, the UC will articulate specific pathways for transfer for 20 majors that are closely aligned to the associate's degrees for transfer established by the California community colleges and CSU pursuant to SB 1440. Any differences will be clearly identified so that students know exactly what is needed for transfer to both UC and CSU campuses. Furthermore, the UC has a goal of 2-to-1 ratio of incoming freshmen to transfers. Only 3 campuses currently meet this expectation. The Office of the President has made a commitment to reach a 2-to-1 transfer threshold by 2017-18 for all undergraduate campuses, with UC Merced excluded. Together, we believe these reforms will open up transfer opportunities to thousands of additional students in the coming years. The second area is related to policies that impact the time it takes students to complete degrees. By March 1st, 2016, each campus will develop pathways for 10 majors that allow students to complete degrees within 3 years. The UC has committed to encouraging these pathways with the goal that 5% of students will access them by the summer of 2017. By the summer session of 2016, 3 campuses will pilot alternative pricing models for summer session. The goal here is to encourage undergraduate students to take more classes during the summer. By July 1st, 2017, all undergraduate UC campuses will review the courses necessary in at least 75% of the majors and reduce those requirements to no more than 45 units where possible. This initiative is modeled after an effort that has already been completed at UCLA. And finally, the UC president will strongly encourage the academic senate to review existing policies on credits for advanced placement courses and college-level examination program tests, as well as the use of the common identification numbering system. These policy changes can have significant impacts if students receive appropriate guidance as they move through their programs. The Office of the President will work with campus advisors to help keep students on track for graduation in 4 years or less. The third area is a set of commitments to become a laboratory for teaching and learning through better use of technology and data. All campuses will report on how they are using data and other technology tools to identify students at risk of repeating courses, not completing on time, or needing advising or other interventions. UC Riverside will pilot activity-based costing, which we discussed at the hearing last week, for its College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, which houses 20 departments. 2 additional campuses will also participate on a smaller scale. At those campuses, 3 departments will pilot these models in 2016 following a scoping study. UC Davis will lead a multi-campus pilot with at least 2 other campuses on deploying adaptive learning technologies, which are focused on improving instruction, increasing the number of students who succeed in difficult courses and persist to completion. And the Office of the President will convene this summer industry leaders to identify online certificate and master's programs that would provide benefit to the workforce. The final commitments relate to the university's long-term retirement liabilities, of which you are well aware. As we discussed last week, under PEPRA, the state imposes a cap on pensionable earnings of $117,000 for employees who are eligible for Social Security benefits. Currently, the UC has a much higher limit, $265,000, for its pension program. By July 1st, 2016, the Regents will adopt a pension plan that includes a PEPRA cap. And by doing so, the UC would receive Proposition 2 funds to pay down existing pension debt. The state would provide $96 million in 2015-16, with roughly $170 million in each of the next 2 years to support unfunded pension debt. I'll close by saying that we expect ongoing transparency regarding the university's progress in implementing these reforms through reports to the governor and the legislature. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. LAO?
Paul Golzewski with the Legislative Analyst's Office. As you heard, the governor proposes to extend his multi-year funding plan for UC into 2017-18 and 2018-19. However, one difference in terms of the plan is that in these 2 years, these 2 out years, he proposes to provide both a 4% increase in state funding, as well as allow the university to increase tuition in those years. And that's a bit different than what's happened over the last few years, where the governor's been providing 4% increases while keeping tuition flat. And it's not clear why the governor thinks that more resources are needed in these out years, such that both state increases and tuition increases would be necessary. And we continue to recommend you not to commit to a multi-year funding plan for UC. Regarding the governor's proposed base increase, we continue to recommend that you link any base increase with inflation. As of May revise, inflation is expected to run 1.7% in the budget year, and we calculate that that would equate to a $98 million increase for the university. Regarding the operational changes that the Department of Finance discussed, we think that these are all good strategies for the university to be pursuing and looking at. The governor has included some deadlines and wants UC to report back on its progress. However, we think that you should place these expectations, these deadlines and reporting requirements in supplemental report language in the budget. We also would recommend that you consider asking CSU to report on what it is doing in terms of these strategies, since many of them could help improve student outcomes and reduce institutional costs at CSU as well. With respect to the $96 million for Proposition 2 funds, after Proposition 2 passed, we recommended the legislature create a long-term plan for the use of these funds, where the legislature could invite various state agencies eligible to receive the funding, such as CalPERS, CalSTRS, Judges Retirement Plan, as well as the University of California, to submit plans for the use of Prop 2 funds so that you could evaluate where the funds might be best used and provide the most benefit. And we continue to recommend that you take a longer-term view of these funds. And lastly, regarding the pension cap, the pension compensation cap, you've heard about this several times throughout the spring in this committee. One comment that I made at the hearing last week is that changes to reduce pension benefits, such as this cap, could potentially be offset by other increases in compensation. And as part of UC's plan, we'd note that they do plan to offer a supplemental defined contribution plan to certain employees subject to the cap. And that could offset the expected savings that we discussed about last week. However, it would have the benefit of not generating future unfunded liabilities, as can happen in a defined benefit plan. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. University of California.
Thank you, Chairman McCarthy, and good afternoon. Nathan Brostrom, Chief Financial Officer of the University of California. First of all, I appreciate the comments about the May revision from both Department of Finance and the legislative analyst. We think the May revision is a good framework for us to move forward. It has obvious benefits for our students in maintaining tuition at current levels for this coming academic year and the subsequent one. This will be 6 years of tuition remaining at the same level, but also because of the infusion of one-time funds, which will help us address a sizable unfunded liability in our retirement plan. The proposal also lays the groundwork for the university to continue to work closely with the legislature to achieve the shared goal of increasing enrollment of California students. We're very positive about the budget proposals to invest new general fund monies for enrollment growth at the community colleges and CSU, and we would like to partner with the legislature to do the same for UC. If permanent funding is provided, we can serve an additional 10,000 undergraduates over the next 4 years, including a sizable influx of new transfer students to UC, as referenced by Christian as part of our commitment to reach the master plan ratio of 2-to-1 for freshmen to transfer at every UC campus. We heard you in the prior 4 meetings of this subcommittee, and those concerns were foremost in our minds as we worked toward an agreement with the administration that both the regions could support, and we respectfully ask for the legislature's support. I'd also like to quickly address a few other concerns that the committee has raised. As you know, the proposal for one-time funds from Proposition 2 to help address the UC's retirement plan's unfunded liability is contingent on the university agreeing to adopt a new tier for UCRP that is consistent with the PEPRA. The plans for that design will be undertaken this fall, and as the LAO mentioned, we may look at alternatives like a DC for some of our employees and not just a defined benefit. Proposition 2 funds are required to supplement and not supplant efforts already underway to address the unfunded liability, which means these funds will not free up money within the university's operating budget or be made available for other uses. It will, however, reduce the total amount of internal borrowing we have pledged to do over the next 3 years. It will strengthen our retirement system and ultimately enable us to reduce the contributions out of our operating budget. Second, the committee has raised concerns about financial aid, particularly last week as it relates to non-resident students. Following that hearing last week, I've already spoken with campus and system-wide leadership on the issue, and we will be looking at it closely in the coming months. The funds that are at issue are part of UC's institutional aid program, where about 1/3 of all mandatory tuition dollars are pooled for purposes of redistributing to students as grants. This is in keeping with the university's practice of returning a portion of our tuition revenue to financial aid grants. If we do make a change in the practice of this awarding to non-residents, it will mean more aid available for California residents, particularly some we could extend into more middle-class students, but it will not add additional money into the operating budget. And finally, I noticed in the agenda that there still is a question about growth in administration. I just want to reiterate the points we made last week. Since 2007-2008, for core funded programs, those supported by state funds and tuition, the number of employees, the number of managers has actually declined by 3,500 full-time equivalents. There has been growth, and it has occurred almost entirely in our medical centers and auxiliaries and other self-supporting entities. The President has further committed to building on this trend for core funded programs by pledging for no growth in state-funded staff in the 5 years of our budget plan. With that, I'm happy to respond to any questions or concerns you may have.
Okay. Mr. Chavez?
Well, I know we've had a lot of heated little discussions on the UCs over funding, and I'm looking more from at it from a long-term systemic approach. I'm intrigued by the UC Riverside doing the activity-based costing, because we discussed that before. Generally, activity-based costing is to look at your processes and find some savings, and how do you make it more efficient, but also how do you provide a higher product. If we go into this correctly, there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from there on how we restructure or how we share it with other universities. Can you go a little farther and just tell you what is the intent or the strategic plan for the regents on using activity-based costing at UC Riverside?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and something we'd be happy to share with you, but also widely across higher education, because this is the first time it has been done in higher education, except as a small pilot in a northeastern school. The idea is that we're going to go into their largest college, humanities, arts, and social sciences, and we're going to be looking at the curriculum and the way they teach different courses. And we're going to be doing a full cost analysis, the cost not only of the professor, the facilities, the TAs, and we're going to compare the different courses they teach, from a seminar that may have 20 to 25 students to a full lecture class that may have 300 to 400 students. We're going to build up the cost of each of those. But then the key thing that we're going to have to do is also look at learning outcomes, because you can always lower the cost by changing the format, but if students aren't learning as much, that comes with a cost. So we need to couple that with how students are doing and looking at both pre-testing and post-testing to gauge that. We are, as Christian mentioned, we're also going to be doing smaller pilots on 2 other campuses. And with that, we hope to have enough data that we can look at other changes across the UC system, but also share it with throughout higher education. Because I do think this is something, as you remarked in our first hearing, that has not been widely done, to look at how courses have been taught and what are the best courses for different outcomes. And that especially needs to be done in this age of technology, when you have pure online courses, you have flipped courses, you have other hybrids, to determine, are they a better cost model, and if so, do we have the same outcomes for our students through those methods?
And if I may, as you go through this process, as I talked to you the other time back in February, when you go into activity-based costing, it's very important to give definition to your terms. And so when you guys do that, I'd love to see what you come up with that. And there's another process that's important you go into before you start changing things, and it's called a balanced scorecard approach.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the 4 components, if I remember right, was the obviously the money. It's your staff, your people, so they're adequately trained and their professionalism goes up. It's the customer, in this case, to be the students, so that the students are receiving the quality education they want. And then it's the process. Are we doing it in a lecture? Are we doing technology? Whatever we're doing. But when those 4 components are balanced, you define them, you balance them, then you go to the activity-based costing to start changing. You don't want to get out of balance. So let's say we're just cutting costs, as you mentioned earlier, and the students are losing or the staff is being overworked. It has to all be in balance so it's moving in the correct direction. So I would really like, if you're willing to share, how you're going to go about this, because if we do this right, it could actually be very revolutionary for education for California.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chavez, and I will share. UC Riverside has been doing a lot of work on, and they have a paper that describes this. So I will make sure that I send it to you in your office, because it's been quite illuminating for me and others throughout the system.
Great, I'm excited about it, and I think that's of much more value than arguing over, 32 million or what this event happened or whatever. Because we need to, at this level, we need to make systemic changes to ensure that we have more citizens educated in a most efficient, effective manner, and driving on. So, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Let me jump in here. The first is, certainly we appreciate the Department of Finance and UC working on this PEPRA issue and coming up with a solution, and sooner the better would certainly help. I know you're not on a big hiring binge, but more and more people getting in the system. So the more we save today will have an impact, a couple decades down the road. So that's number one. And I wanted to just focus on, I know the last few hearings we've talked about, some of the challenges that UC had with the application process and enrollment, and you're getting applications in right now, and you're sending out waiting lists essentially. And so, families who are getting these waiting lists, they say, "Oh, great, an accord with the UC and the governor. It's all good. They're giving them more money. Where's my letter to rescind the waiting list offer? Is that rescission letter coming to these students?" We,
as I mentioned, we believe that we can enroll 10,000 more students over the next 4 years. In the coming year, realistic.
I mean, the next year.
Yeah, in the coming year, a realistic number would be 500 new freshmen. We can add more transfers, because in transfers you can bring them in on winter semester or spring semester or winter quarter. So we could add more transfers. And a lot of our focus is going to be on transfer students in the coming years, both because of the funding pipeline.
500 new for the fall
of 15-16,
and then the transfers mid-year. That's an increase of what had been put out there with the January budget.
That's right.
Yeah. And what does that equate to roughly what percentage enrollment growth in the budget year?
Oh, in the budget year would be about, depending on how many transfer we brought in, would be about 0.5%.
1% or so?
Yeah, yeah. But over the 4 years, that would be a 4% increase.
4%?
Yeah.
1% per year, 4% annually?
No, 1% per year. 10,000. Our total student population is about 240,000 right now.
And I guess that leads to something that I guess is an obvious question, is that we had a great dialogue last week with what was her name?
Nina Robinson.
Nina Robinson, as far as what the UC could accommodate for enrollment growth, and everybody here wants to push the envelope, and you have the 119 in the budget, and the additional $100 million. Granted, it's from the Prop 2 to address your pension liabilities in the out years, but you were going to have to address it anyway with UC money, so it kind of essentially frees up money in the UC system.
Actually, that's not correct. I apologize. That is what it really does. It addresses the unfunded liability above what we had proposed, what the regions had put into employer contribution.
I get that, but if that money hadn't come, you would have had to take that money from somewhere in the UC system to address that.
Not in the current year.
Well, you'd eventually.
Eventually, but all it means that we'll be able to bring in the time. But that's
it's money that you didn't have yesterday.
We're very grateful for it. It does help us.
Sure.
But we're projected to go on 14%.
It's more taxpayer support to the UC system.
Yeah.
But let me follow where I'm headed here. So that 119, plus the 100 and the 25 and the 25, and it's nothing new here. It's outlined in the staff agenda, and I guess you would read, $265 million in new money that they didn't have before from the state of California to the UC system, and we get the 500 students plus the mid-year, so maybe 1% enrollment growth. It just seems like that's not enough.
Well, I first of all, we have the capacity, as we've said before, to add more students. I mean, our campuses can take 25 to 30,000 more students, and we have a plan to take 10,000 more. I would, strongly argue that there is no money for enrollment in this agreement, and I think finance.
Well, I guess that's my point. Is I know there's no money says here for enrollment, but there's $265 million. Granted, some is is cap and trade, some goes to your pension long term.
All that's in there for our permanent base budget is $119.
I get that, but it's a check from the state of California, and we get 1% enrollment growth. So on the natural, you would think we should be getting more from that.
Yeah, and first of all, we're not going to get the pension money until we put the new tier in place, and that goes directly into UCRS and does nothing to affect our operating budget. So, we want more than anyone to enroll more students.
We'll agree to disagree. I'd argue that's more money going to the UC system from the taxpayers of the state of California. And then the second piece there is on the out-of-state enrollment. So in the governor's budget, that was.
I just said that.
He wasn't paying attention to us.
He said, "Don't forget to mention it's one time." I'm like, "That's what I've been saying the whole."
And in the governor's budget that was put forward in January, there was a, he said additional. All these monies are the 119 is based upon no fee increase and no increase in out-of-state enrollees. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of the accord that we hear is no fee increase, but you are now allowed to enroll out-of-state students at a higher number than you were before.
Well, we are going to plan to raise non-resident tuition.
Okay.
For non-resident students, and professional degree fees, as was approved by the regents in November, except for the law school. So those are our two changes.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we had said is by increasing out-of-state slots, potentially decrease the number of seats available to Californians. Granted, consistently the UC has disagreed, and he says by doing that you're able to free up slots for California students. So it begs the question is that if you follow the governor's proposal and allowed you to increase out-of-state slots, shouldn't that subsequently and concurrently allow the university to increase in-state slots as well?
Yeah, and actually that's part of the overall budget plan, is that by increasing both non-resident tuition and increasing the number of non-residents, that will all together will help us increase the California
For
enrollment.
1%?
No, the 10,000 students.
Yeah. Well, 1% this year.
Yeah.
And then 1%.
Yeah, I mean, part of this year is just the timing misalignment.
Yeah.
Is
And then,
that,
but the subsequent year is 1% per year?
Well, actually, I drew up a plan of what I think is doable. It would be about 7,000. Yeah, so it'd be a little bit more than 1% in future years, because this year is lower. So we would have 2,100 new California resident undergraduates each year thereafter, and 900 new graduate students, so 3,000. So it's like roughly 1.5% a year.
Okay. And can you walk through again? I apologize. I was in the middle of something up here talking about the agenda. You mentioned the second to last issue during your presentation, some comments as far as the issue that we brought up
the financial
a week
aid?
and a half ago in the financial aid for non-resident students?
Yeah. First of all, we took a look at this. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Since the hearing, I've talked about both with campus leadership and system-wide leadership to understand it more effectively, and it's something we're going to be looking at this fall. Probably with the goal of revising the policy. I would make it clear, though, that this money comes out of the return to aid that's charged on all tuition. It's not out of our operating budget, and so it would stay within financial aid. So it would be available for further extending into middle class scholarships or lowering the cost for our low income students. But it's not money that we can free up to use for other parts of the operating budget.
So it could be used for any type of financial aid?
Any type within the policies that are adopted by the regions. Yeah.
I know a few weeks ago we talked as far as some of the dilemmas that you're facing with enrollment growth and summer school, and you wanted
the Pell? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a
that could
viable
be, yeah. That
piece
actually
of the puzzle to increase access and get kids out of there in a shorter time period.
That's actually a very good suggestion for that use. But also further extending into middle class, because our low income students we have protected quite well. It's really when they don't qualify for any federal aid or state aid and they just get a small amount of institutional aid that it's the highest percentage of family income that's going to a UC education.
Now, will this policy have to be agendized before the regents, and if so, what would the timeline be for that?
I don't think it does. I think it's something that the president can review and change. I'm not sure. I haven't cleared that with the Office of General Counsel.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you go back and just for the record outline the 4-year enrollment growth?
Uh-huh.
Did you say it's 10,000 students over the next 4 years? So the budget year plus 3 more years?
So it would be what I said, about 500 in 15-16, and that's not counting the transfers. I don't know what the mid-year transfer would be. And then it would be about 2,100 each year thereafter. This would be heavily weighted towards transfers in order to we want to meet the 2-to-1 ratio at every single campus. And then we would also target about 3,000 additional graduate students. Limited growth in 15-16, again, for the same reason, then about 900 a year thereafter. And this is also critical for meeting the in-state growth, because a lot of these graduate students teach undergraduate classes, serve as TAs and grad student instructors. And so all told, that would be 9,850 over the 4-year period.
Okay, and that's basically a little over 1% per year.
Yeah, if it's broken out that way. But if you look at the California undergraduates, it's more than that.
And do you think that will allow you to keep pace with demand for people applying to the UC system?
Yeah, we think we can still meet all the provisions of the master plan with that. I mean, the high school population has been plateauing, as the finance projections will show. What has changed, though, is that the graduation rates have been increasing, especially Latino, Hispanic students and African American students. And so we want to make sure that we have spots as these graduation rates and completion rates continue to improve. Okay,
and then going back to the non-resident students, and granted, there's still some angst from us as far as increasing the number, but we hear the argument that they provide value to the system, certainly as far as diversity in your student body and so forth, but also paying the full freight times 4 sometimes. There was a proposal put forth by the speaker at your regents meeting in the fall, which had a recommendation to increase the out-of-state tuition by 10%,
17%,
17%,
yeah.
And then my understanding is the recommendation you had recently after the meetings with the governor is 5%. Plus another few percent, so a total of 8%.
8% over 2 years.
Over
so
2 years.
It was to reach her goal, but do it in a more graduated fashion. So it wasn't the one-time shock.
And had you considered, doing more than that? And if you could, let's say, double that to what the speaker had proposed. Thus, I think it was $50 million because the whole thing was $100 million, so half of that would be $50 million.
Yeah.
$50 million to add another 1% enrollment growth. I mean, those are real resources to because if the goal really, if what the UC is always saying is that these students paying this full freight, help California students. So can we take that a step further and not just help, but potentially expand more enrollment slots by doing a little bit more?
Yeah, we essentially get to the same level as the speaker, but we do it over 2 years, so it's not as big a shock in 1 year. So I
think it's half because you said 4 and 4, and she had
8 and 8.
17.
8 and 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be 8% this year, 8% then next year, and then we go to 5% non-resident increases after that. So that's and in terms of dollars, for us it's $23 million this year, $18 million the next year, and $4 million. So it gets to almost the $50 million, but over a 2-year period.
Over 2 year, $100 million. Then it would get you to 16. If it's 8 and 8, isn't it $50 million?
No, $23 million increase
per each 8%.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'd love to see the math on that. I thought we had a different number.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that with you. And then the other thing, Mr. McCarty, for the issue with non-resident growth is we also want to encourage some of our campuses that are, it sort of falls in 3 buckets now, where Berkeley, UCLA, and San Diego are quite high, and all of them are holding flat, non-resident. Irvine, Santa Barbara, and Davis are all around 10% or below, and then there are several campuses, Merced, Irvine, or Merced, Riverside, and Santa Cruz that are still well below 5%. So we want to support them in increasing their number of non-residents, for both the financial reasons, but also for, the other benefits of having a multicultural, international student body.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll hold this issue open until later in the week. Thank you for coming out today. Next issue, the California State University. Let me just stop right here. In the audience, was there anybody here who was going to testify, public comment on UC issues? There are. So let's proceed with that briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, here to speak in support of full funding for the UC labor centers. In previous years, their funding was cut from $6 million down to $2 million, and then last year it was brought back up to $6 million. And we'd like to see that funding level continue in the future. We'll defer to all the experts on the best way to make that happen, but we think that they provide a very unique role, but they also provide very critically important information and research and studies that we all use both as advocates and the legislature to make sure that when we take action on issues like the minimum wage or healthcare or immigrant worker rights issues, that we're doing so based on good information. They can usually turn around that kind of information on very short timelines and also help inform the legislative process that way. So we hope to see that funding continue at the $6 million level this year as well. Thank you.
Hello, Esmael Contreras, student at UC Berkeley, and I'm here on behalf of the UC Student Association. So the governor may revise. Students believe brought a much-needed reprise from the tuition increase that was going to happen this fall, at least for most undergraduates. We do have some concerns regarding graduate students seeing very drastic increases in their tuition, up to 20% in some cases. But we look forward to working on a number of cost-saving initiatives described by the governor and the university. We are concerned regarding the access to safe financial aid, particularly the Middle Class Scholarship Act. And we'll continue to work on increasing the competitive Cal Grant program. Those are some of the things that we would like to see coming out in the future.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
We'll go back to the regular agenda and proceed with the CSU system. Department of Finance.
Thank you. Krishna Asmbudsub with Finance. The governor's budget proposed $119.5 million general fund ongoing for the CSU as well, with a plan for similar increases in future years, as well as $25 million general fund on a one-time basis for deferred maintenance at CSU campuses. Consistent with the administration's plan, the CSU has already announced that it would not increase system-wide tuition and fees in 2015-16. The university's decision will preserve access by keeping a CSU education affordable for more students. Furthermore, the Chancellor's Office recently reported on a number of initiatives already underway at CSU campuses to manage operations more efficiently and generate savings. These savings can then be redirected towards higher priorities. The CSU had indicated that it would use the additional resources proposed in the governor's budget for the following: to fund existing obligations, such as increased costs for pensions and health benefits, to increase employee compensation system-wide by 2%, to support the costs of about 4,000 additional students, and to address backlogs in critical maintenance and infrastructure. The May revision includes an additional $38 million general fund ongoing for the CSU. With these additional resources, the administration expects the university to do the following. First, to support efforts to improve student success at all of the campuses as approved by the trustees. And you've heard previously about the CSU's graduation initiative, which set goals to be achieved by the year 2025, including a 4-year graduation rate for freshman entrants of 24% and a 2-year rate for transfer students of 35%. The CSU will report publicly on its progress towards these goals, and we expect them to aim to meet or exceed these targets and timelines. Over the long term, as we've discussed previously, reducing the time it takes students to complete degrees should provide access to significant numbers of new students and significant savings to students and families. Second, the funds will allow the CSU to enroll more transfer students beginning in the coming year. While timelier completion should support additional access to the CSU, the administration recognizes the demands campuses are facing today, particularly from students who have completed associate's degrees for transfer and who are guaranteed admission to the university. The additional funds will allow campuses to enroll at least 1,500 more transfer students by the spring of 2016. In addition, as you discussed during the community colleges portion of this hearing, the May revision proposes a pilot program with community colleges to offer basic skills education to CSU students who need remediation. As more of this instructional workload is handled through the community colleges, the CSU could redirect resources to continuing improvements on time to degree or for other purposes. And finally, the May revision proposes $35 million greenhouse gas reduction fund for energy projects at CSU campuses. These resources will be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with a co-benefit of reducing CSU's utilities costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Leo?
As you heard as I discussed with UC, we'd encourage you to take a more traditional approach to CSU's budget and fund a COLA enrollment growth and then your targeted priorities. So first, for a COLA, as I mentioned before, we're expecting inflation to be 1.7% in the budget year, which would be $72 million for CSU. In terms of enrollment growth, as we testified earlier in the year, we found in reviewing the available data that CSU continues to admit eligible freshmen as defined by the master plan. But there is data to suggest that they're turning away eligible transfer students. And we reviewed some data that the university had provided to determine how much growth might be needed. Given how late it is in the year, they've obviously made fall admission decisions already, and have indicated that they're enrolling 3,400 new FTES. We think that could help address the transfer access issue, and this would be $24 million for this purpose. In addition, the governor has a proposal to authorize over $310 million in capital outlay projects for CSU. There's about over 100 projects on this list, largely deferred maintenance type items. And we reviewed the list and think they're generally reasonable projects. We had one concern that we noted, which was a project for the Monterey Bay campus, where they proposed to address some vacant buildings currently. We think instead the university should prioritize addressing life safety concerns at buildings that are actually occupied. So we'd recommend removing that project from the list, but approving the others. And CSU has indicated it would finance this by issuing bonds and would require $10 million annually for the debt service. And we'd recommend providing that funding. And any additional funding that you would wish to provide beyond that, we would recommend that you weigh the trade-offs. We think that one area that might be one of your best options would be deferred maintenance, largely because you could provide the funding on a one-time basis and wouldn't necessarily commit to ongoing support given the state budget revenues could change in the future. And also CSU has indicated they have a large backlog to address. With that, I'll take any questions.